Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reliability Matters podcast. For those of you who are counting, this is episode number 158. Today, I'm excited to introduce the hosts of the Decode podcast, a dynamic trio of young professionals making waves in the electronics manufacturing industry. With experience rooted in contract manufacturing and stencil fabrication for electronic assemblies, they bring a fresh perspective to the table. Although they're at the start of their podcasting journey, Decode has already begun to attract attention, tackling industry insights with a unique lens that up-and-coming voices can uniquely offer. My guests today are Daniel Stanphill, SMT process engineer at Aurora Boardworks, a contract assembler located in Aurora, Nebraska; Sean Kincaid, president of K&F Electronics, located in Fraser, Michigan, also a contract manufacturer; and Elias Malfavon, president of Metal Etch Services, a SMT stencil fabricator located in San Marcos, California. I'll ask them about their experiences, challenges, and how they're setting out to decode the world of electronics manufacturing when I return in just a moment. Stick around.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Sean, while you were in the green room while the intro was playing, I saw you grooving a little bit. I saw some moves.
The music was amazing, and then the professionalness. I texted my wife. I said, "I'm actually nervous for this one. This is high production value. I love it. I love it."
Well, high production value for high production guests. That's all. That's what matters, right? Thanks, fellas, for agreeing to be on the show. You are on the other side of the microphone this time. Usually, you're the ones asking questions, and I thought it would be a good idea to switch it around. And I'm glad you all agreed to come on this show. Because the theme of this show is reliability, I owe it to my audience to talk at least for part of this episode on that subject. So I'm going to dive in with some tech questions for y'all, and then we'll get into your podcast and talk about that as well. So let's start off with on the subject of contract manufacturing. And I'm assuming that Daniel and Sean will be eager to respond to these, but Elias, that does not exclude you. You're obviously part of that world in terms of supplying one of the most valuable tools. Everything begins with a stencil. But let's start off with this. Can anyone describe the most critical factors a company should consider when choosing a contract manufacturer for electronic assemblies? What are, in your world, what would you consider the most important considerations with all of the contract manufacturers out there, small and large? What, in your mind, would be important for potential customers to consider?
I guess I'll go first because it's already been extremely hard to wait this long to talk. I mean, usually the first one to speak, so this has been brutal. No.
Well, you're not letting us down.
I think the easy answer is probably like, can they deliver the product on time to the quality you need, right? That's just kind of the canned, easy, cliche answer. But I think probably more importantly, like, what do you look for in a partnership, right? What kind of qualities are important to you? Because we're not just building some nondescript thing. We're taking your product and trying to help you turn it into reality and bring it to market or improve it or help your margins wherever we're coming into the picture. So, loyalty, honesty, respect, open communication, Nebraska grit, if applicable. Those are probably the things I think are most important.
Yeah, very good. And Sean, what would you add to that?
Honestly, after being on this side of the fence, if I were to look at somebody, it would be capacity. So for me,
not Nebraska grit, huh? You're not buying that one.
He stole that from Detroit. So I don't know if you know this, but Detroit Lions have had a running theme for the last 2 years called grit. And so I think that's where he got it. He doesn't even realize it, but it's Detroit grit, so that's where it came from. So
There you
we
go.
can give a little bit to him if he watches the games ever. But for
I
me,
spend a lot of time up there.
for me, it's capacity first, and the reason is because that supplier then could give you the attention you really need. And when you go through like a job where you have maybe you're prototyping and you have a big runner that you want to do, you want to know that they're going to be able to pause on your job for a little bit, spend some extra time on the build of materials, go through all the fine details that you are going to need when you're building such technical designs. I would start with capacity and then technical know-how. How much frequency have they tried this and that, and what are some of their max and min limits that they've done before. To me, that would be the most important, like the first things I would look at if I were looking for a CM.
Excellent. And how has, and I'm assuming that things have changed since you've started in this industry, any of you have, but how have the role of contract manufacturers evolved in recent years, particularly with the rise in demand for faster production times and smaller, more complex electronic assemblies, miniaturization? How has that caused the CM world to evolve, if it has?
I think that the fact that the complexity is increasing really plays into our hands as contract manufacturers, because if you've got a really simple product, you might be tempted to build it yourself, right? Control as many of the elements as you can, save on manufacturing cost and potentially, but the more complex it gets, the higher the level of expertise you need. Those costs of doing it yourself could really balloon out of proportion where it might not make sense anymore. It makes a lot more sense to just trust the people who have the sophisticated equipment, the experience, the know-how, to do it to the standards you need for a good, lasting product that'll hold up over the course of time. Reliability, right?
Reliability matters. And Sean?
For me, it's so wild because I bought a 2023 pick and place, brand new, and it's now 2024, and they came out with a new model this year, and there's jobs already that I'm quoting that I go, man, I wish I got the newer model, right? And we're 1 year away from the model prior, and it's just amazing that quick of a transition from, well, now they have ultra high def cameras and they have different type of pickup locations. They have so many different features just in that 1 year.
Yeah.
And from a pick and place machine, just that one piece of equipment alone, it's constantly evolving. And then you think, in 2023, if you would ask me if I would be running the jobs I'm running in 2024, I would have said no way. There's, that's such a leap. And then now I've printed more 01005s this year than probably 0201s. It's just keeps getting smaller and smaller and tighter. And now I have to change the paste and I have to change, it just so much different changes. It's crazy how much it evolves.
And Elias, so that you don't feel left out, even though this is the contract manufacturer section, I'm sure the same question applies to you too. How has, in the stencil fabrication world, how has the increasing demand for quick turn and miniaturization landed on your doorstep?
Yeah, it certainly has, because as the components that make up modern assemblies get smaller, that typically means that there's more of them, right? And the more components that there are, that the higher aperture count on a stencil. So, the amount of time that's required in order to manufacture a stencil has really gone up. And if not for the advancement in laser equipment to pace that, we wouldn't be able to keep these breakneck speeds that are expected us in terms of turnaround time, right? Everybody needs the stencil yesterday. So 24-hour churn once upon a time, like you get the order today, we'll ship it tomorrow. Well, that's not good enough. So certainly it has impacted the techniques that are required to keep up with the demand and be able to produce 40,000, 50,000 aperture count stencils and ship them that day. It's been a wild evolution and very quick.
Yeah, I remember when surface mount first came on the scene, the holes were rather large, the apertures were rather large, and they were rather far apart. There was way more metal between the frame than apertures between the frame. And now I see when you're talking about 40,000 apertures or something on a stencil, I wonder what's holding what's maintaining the rigidity of that stencil. It looks like Sean forgot to pay the power bill there. Oh, there he goes. Sean's got one of those sensor lights that he has to every once in a while. You're just going to have to get animated to keep the light on.
Just trying to save the environment. Sometimes I thought I turned it to on. I guess I didn't.
Oh, that's funny. But I don't know what holds the rigidity of stencils today, because there's just so many apertures so close together. There doesn't seem to be a lot of framework around it. But I would think that's challenging.
Yeah, and especially when you couple that with thinner foil, right? I mean,
right.
The stencils of yesteryear you spoke about are 6 or 7 mils in thickness, and now you're talking 4 mils is kind of standard, and down from there all the way down to single mil thickness foil. So yeah, there's really not the same structure that there used to be.
Yeah, it's almost to the point of just taking aluminum foil out of your kitchen drawer and tightening it and poking holes in it. I mean, there's not a whole lot of rigidity. Sean's tried. Did miniaturization change the way the apertures are cut? Are they laser, or are they water jet, or are they machined out, or over the years?
Yeah, so I guess my entrance in the industry, there was still some amount of chemical etch stencils being manufactured, right? And it was a great process for some reasons. And chief among them is whether you're making 1 aperture or 1 million aperture, it takes the exact same amount of time, right?
Right.
But that has its limitations, right? That process has so many different steps to it, so many different pieces of tolerance stacking, generating a photo tool, transferring that image photographically onto the laminated foil, and then the etch process itself. So it just it wasn't good enough. So that's where lasers entered and kind of really changed the game in terms of stencil production. And within laser stencils, or stencil lasers rather, there's been an evolution there as well. The early lasers were table motion, so you imagine a fixed laser beam and the material actually moved X and Y underneath the beam, and they were lamp pumped. So the beam's diameters were greater, and there was wear parts and consumables that had to be managed throughout the life of the lamp. And fast forward today, we have fiber diode lasers and gantry motion systems. So what that's meant is that we can cut a lot smaller of openings with a lot higher repeatability and faster, right? So the carbon fiber gantry on modern stencil laser, that thing really flies. Daniel was at our facility, call it a month ago, and I had to mop up the drool underneath him after he saw that thing. He was like a kid in the candy store watching that thing cut.
Yeah, next thing you know, it's going to be contract assembly and stencils. Watch out. Watch out how much you show them. So
you're right about that.
Yeah. What are some of the unique challenges that contract manufacturers face in maintaining quality and compliance standards, especially for industries with stringent requirements like aerospace and medical devices and other high-rel applications?
I don't know if it's necessarily unique, but the standards that apply change when the reliability demands increase. So it's not enough to just want to, try harder and give it more effort or just pay a little closer attention. You've got to have the knowledge and know how the process is established to deliver the necessary quality, the results that are going to last over time, high reliability, right? So you need sophisticated enough equipment to be able to handle the demands. So you can't get to miniaturization and have it perform exactly as you need if you don't follow the right processes when assembling it. So you really have to be at the top level of your game to be able to meet those high reliability standards and needs, like in a medical device, or if it's going into another stratosphere.
Sean?
We had a recent audit by a very large company, opened my eyes up to a lot of the things that we were missing, and I had the opportunity to hire a process expert, and he's been doing it for 36 years. He has opened my eyes up to so much. I'm trying to go for my medical certification and then aerospace. And to get those certifications, there's little things that I would never even think of. So example, just a simple fixture of fixing a billboard on a component. If you have your humidity set at 50% in the room, it's a lot less likely to cause that type of issue with the little bit of static that comes off from pulling that cover tape off automatically. But he takes it like a step further where everything is MSL rated. Everything has a clock on it.
Moisture sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah. And the second that bag's open, it's documented.
Hmm.
And then you have your bake out procedure for that. Then he has a special sealer that seals it. And then you have a decadent pack inside of it. And then we have nitrogen cabinets now that go into it. And just the level of inventory tracking just for that alone, when it comes to this more sophisticated builds, is just so eye-opening to me, where before it was just cut the bag open, put it on the reel, and if you get to it today, you get to it today, and stuff like that. But
Right.
once you get into these high moisture sensitive devices, it adds so much into it. And I remember Daniel told me the other day about a job he was doing, and Daniel, maybe you could talk about this, because I think it's a great point to add to this, about that one job you were talking about with your friend that gets built and then potted and built, wash multiple times. I don't know if you can talk about that, because that was pretty demanding.
Yeah, I mean, it's borrowed knowledge, but he was saying once you get to a certain MSL level, I think it was MSL 5, you actually have to bake the moisture out after every single step. So you bake everything before you start. After pick and place 1, you wash it, you bake it. After the second side, you wash it, you bake it. After you add any hand soldering onto it, you wash it, you bake it. If you do the selective before that, you wash it, you bake it.
Wow.
It's like there's no step. Basically, if you look at it twice, you've got to bake it again.
Right.
Have
Have a dirty thought in your head. You got to wash it again. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he said MSL 6 was even crazier. I don't know. I didn't even ask. I was trying to wrap my head around MSL 5 still. It was a crazy process he was going through. Wow.
Yeah, you don't think about that stuff. There's a reason why the high rel stuff, military stuff, aviation stuff costs what it costs. They talk about the, $9,000 coffee maker. Well, it may be a $500 Mr. Coffee, but it had to go through $8,500 worth of testing, right?
Ooh.
To qualify. This question is unique to Sean. In our industry, we are very siloed. We all know that, and I've heard you guys talking about that in the past too. And I think that most assemblers believe, and I've said this on the show before, but most assemblers believe that boards are delivered by storks. They drop them in parachutes and they just land on the loading dock, right? Magically, right? So I don't think most assemblers have an appreciation for board design, board fabrication. Sean, you cut your teeth on board fabrication and design before you were a CM. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So how does that knowledge of board fabrication, board design, provide advantages in your contract assembly world? Does it? And if so, what insight can you illuminate on that?
For me, it's prior to actually running the board. So I'll go through like a thorough inspection of the boards we get now. And, I can kind of see, I had a job the other day, for example, I noticed the hazel in the upper right-hand corner of about every fourth array was bumpy. It wasn't smooth finished. And then I knew exactly from that process of how the hazel gets deposited onto the panel, how they were loading the panel when they were fabbing the board and how it came out, and their air knife is dirty at the bottom right-hand corner. So those little things like that, where somebody else might just see a bumpy hazel and not understand why, or solder mask is, after running through selective solder, they might see like a white haze around it, or a different type of form. I'll know what step in the process of the mask curing that caused that, and then I can bake the boards, right? I know the temperature to bake them at, how long to bake them at, and then
Right.
that won't happen future on in the selective solder. Warping, these guys made fun of me before, but it's a very caveman way to fix it, and you just literally take a big piece of FR4 062 stack on top, and then you put a cinder block on a huge oven and that we have, and
You
bake it
press
at
it. Yeah.
yeah,
You heat press it.
325, and the weight of that flattens it out, and that warping is now gone 100%. So there's like little tricks of the trade that we use in the PCB world to make the board work that I can apply as I'm going over to the assembly side.
But the question would be for high rel stuff, is that cinder block certified and calibrated?
What are you gauging at, right? Like, so are you gauging at the way the warpage was prior? And then
No,
are
I'm
you
talking about the
gauging-
cinder block. I'm being facetious. Is a cinder block certified?
Don't
calibrated?
knock the cinder
Is that on the
block
bomb?
is in every PCB shop there is. I'm telling you, they got multiple.
secrets.
Together.
That's part of the skeletons that are buried.
Yes.
Daniel, you've discovered a lot of how boards are made and how they're designed, whether that's comforting or makes you angry, I'm not sure. But have you ever had a product come in where it's just so difficult to build the way it's designed? And if so, have you given input to your customers about how to change it so that it could lower the production time or maybe improve the yields?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even to the point where we've taken a job that we had accepted, and then when the boards were supplied by the customer, so we didn't have a say in how they got fabricated, or who did the fabrication. And so when we got the boards and saw the quality that they were at, we determined that no, it didn't matter what level of equipment you had, just the way the boards were fabricated was, potentially, it's just going to lead to bad results. You're going to end up with a lot of high chance of failure, whether it looks right initially or not. Good chance of things to go wrong during the assembly process, and through no fault of our own, just things that we would look for and request to be changed from a design standpoint for manufacturing. Things like the pads weren't planar. I mean, they weren't parallel with each other. They were offset, matching, corresponding pads for one component wouldn't be aligned with each other, and they would be different sizes. The amount of exposed copper would be different sizes from left to right, and just things that are going to naturally induce tombstoning and misalignment where it's not enough of a percentage on the pads, things like that. And so if there's anything going on from a quality standpoint or from a design standpoint where, simple things like if it's too close to the edge where it's either going to require carriers to make the process work or just any extra step that if you made a slight design change, if you were able to add borders, if you were able to move things a few mills away from where it currently is, then we could run the boards much faster, much quicker through automation and bring the price down for you. So that's kind of our best thing we can offer is any slight change we can tell you that, hey, this little change that won't take you very long or is pretty easy to accomplish, now in volume brings the price down significantly because it makes the process so much easier.
I had a contract manufacturer on my show, a small family-owned short run, like prototype, small run contract manufacturer on, and he was doing a board for one of his customers that the requirement was black laminate, black mask over it, because, well, for reasons I'll explain later, and they were just having a heck of a time reflowing things on it. The solder was acting funny around the edges of the mask, and there's all sorts of problems, and they had to do quite a bit of hand rework and repair just to get a product out the door. So the yields were terrible, and the production time was not what they had originally bid. So out of sheer frustration, they reached out to the customer and said, "Can we just put a green mask on it and call it a day?" And the answer was, "Yeah, I don't care." He goes, well, no, you specified black. Was there a reason? He goes, oh, I just thought it looked cool. So
You sure?
they went to a standard mask and everything was fine. So
People might be surprised to know. I know for me it was a shock. A matte finish performs infinitely better in the selective than a glossy finish does. The flux stays active and available for way longer, and it makes a huge difference. It doesn't dry up as easily during the preheat cycle, and just
interesting.
I just never would have guessed that a simple matte versus shiny, makes the selective infinitely easier.
Yeah. Well, I would think if we were to exaggerate it, if you were to take a droplet of water and drop it on a piece of sandpaper, it would not wet out as wide as it would if you dropped it on glass. I'm assuming. I haven't done a DOE on that, and I don't think I will. But my logic in my head, anyway, is telling me that because of the surface area of a rougher surface would contain a little bit of that surface tension a little bit. So I would imagine in the world of electronics and boards and masking materials that a matte, if you look at it under a microscope, a matte finish has probably got a little bit, maybe a tiny little bit more porosity to it on the surface level anyway, than a glossy finish would. I could be wrong on that, but that makes sense in my
I think you're right.
in my head. Yeah.
When we manufactured boards, if you wanted matte, you got green mask. And if you wanted gloss, which was 95% of the boards, was just the same green, but we added clear to it. So once you mix those two together, then you got your gloss finish. Yeah.
So it's actually a different chemistry.
It is.
It's an amalgam of different materials.
Yeah. And so the operator, I disagree with Daniel. I prefer gloss, to be honest with you. I haven't tested his theory, though, about whether one solders well versus the other in selective solder. I might take him up on that one day and just build a board and see what happens. But for me, maybe they just have a heavy hand on the gloss, or maybe when they're doing the matte, maybe they're using a spray finish, right? So maybe it's a thinner, right? So, but maybe when they're doing the gloss, maybe they're using what's called like the DP 1500, the DP 2500. It's a machine that you put in a trolley and it basically squeegees up and squeegees down the mass. It's a lot thicker deposit. So maybe that thicker deposit is preventing or taking up some of that heat.
Right. It might not be the material. It could be the application method or curing methods or whatever, right? It could be some other effect, but which still yields the same outcome, but for different reasons. Let's switch the subject briefly to stencils, Elias. That would be you. You are a fabricator of stencils for our industry, the electronic assembly industry. What are the key factors in designing and manufacturing stencils for surface mount applications, and how do these impact the overall quality of the assembly process? And I'll start by saying you get blamed for everything, because I've heard so many people say it all starts with the print, right? The make or break end product all starts with the print, and the print starts with you, Elias. Yeah. So, Metal Etch has a lot of responsibility here. So, how would you define the impact with all the key factors and all that as it comes to stencils?
Yeah, so I think that most would agree, and rightfully so, that the stencil has a large effect on the overall printing and SMT process. And I like to think about what we do as just a couple of whats, right? So what we make, that being the design, how we optimize the apertures, what we do with that raw Gerber data that comes in, because it's not just a matter of, okay, here's the paste file, cool, let me feed it to the stencil laser, and out pops the stencil after that. So what we make, being the design, the other part is what we make it on, right? So what materials are we using? Long ago, it used to be just kind of run-of-the-mill, full hard 304 stainless steel. That was a base material of most stencils. That's since changed. There's now purpose-built SMT stencil foils, right? So what does that mean? They have tighter grain alignment. They're stress relieved, so they're not impacted by thermal distortion during the cutting process as much. And, that's just stainless steel. There's also other materials that have made their way into the stencil world, like electroformed nickel foil. That's something we're seeing an increased presence of because it's harder, right? So as we get down into these really thin foil values, call it 30 microns, 40 micron foils, that hardness is necessary in order to produce a stencil that has a life that's anywhere similar to 4, 5, or 6 mils. So what we make it on is important. And then what we make it with is another factor. We kind of touched on stencil lasers a bit. And that's overwhelmingly the preferred method. But within stencil lasers, there's different varieties, different manufacturers, and different generation machines. So trying to produce today's stencils with 20 years ago stencil lasers just doesn't work.
Right.
They were fantastic at the time, best available technology. They did great for the average assembly of 1999, but they just don't have a place in the market now. So, keeping pace with the production equipment's been paramount. We just recently retired a 2007 vintage laser that was just kind of staying around for cutting border holes in glue, but it was taking up a valuable footprint. But so yeah, I think those are the factors that we think about the most, and the effects of not considering these and not executing them well is, defect city. As soon as Daniel or Sean put that stencil on their screen printer and the blade meets the foil.
Right. What? How does aperture design affect either positively or negatively defects in printing, like bridging or insufficient paste deposition, especially for fine pitch and high density components?
Oh, it has a huge effect. And I like how you phrase the question, because it can either be to your benefit or to your detriment, depending on what strategies are implemented. And, some of the defect potentials that you brought up, bridging. And is it wet bridging? Is it happening as soon as the paste is deposited, or is it bridging that's happening during reflow? So it has an enormous effect, and we want to treat it at the component level, right? So there's a tendency to just, okay, we're going to do an overall reduction to every component and treat everything the same way. But it's really so much more nuanced to that. Even within a particular style of package, from manufacturer to manufacturer, there may be different considerations that have to be made. So it's a great place to save yourself a lot of headaches, putting in that front end work and considering the pitch of a component and what are some things that will likely occur if we don't make this modification, or what can we stave off if we do make this modification. So stencil design is huge, and these guys will attest to it.
Yeah, they're on the receiving end of that. You have to fabricate it, which is hard enough. They actually have to print it, which is at least equally as hard. Is that right?
It's harder.
Yeah, it's harder.
He's got the easy job.
Right. We all wish we were Elias, right? Just a walk in the park.
No way. He's got 24-hour same day turns. I don't want that. That's too much stress.
I think it was you, Sean, that posted something on LinkedIn. You went into the shop in the middle of the night to get something done the other day.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That was literally last night. And then this morning I was back up at 4 a.m. back at the shop at 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the sun never sets on you.
Yeah, all to find out that they ordered the wrong, or the customer's BOM was wrong on the part that they ordered for the 2 diodes, and I can't get it to work. So now they have to wait. We have to wait until they drop off the parts tomorrow. So
pennies holding up dollars in that case, right?
It's not even about, because it wasn't even that much money. It's more of just I have other jobs to run. So
right. There's a knock-on effect.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's switch topics for now and talk about this, the Decode podcast. used my own clip here. I was a guest on your show. Thank you very much. And you've had lots of very interesting guests on the show. What inspired you guys to start a podcast in the electronic assembly industry? And what unique perspective are you attempting to bring, or you are bringing, not just attempting, to that space?
Well, we were having these discussions every day privately amongst ourselves. And kind of as we were chatting about all industry related things, after a while, the idea kind of came up. I'll allow Sean to take credit for the idea of having a podcast to begin with. He was like, why aren't we doing this out in front of everyone? Let's have these conversations for the public, because we learn from all the conversations we have, and we feel like everyone else can learn from them too. That we also like to think that we provide a bridge between different disciplines in the industry. And so we like to have these conversations. You kind of alluded to it earlier, talking about how everything's siloed, and we've all felt that ourselves. It's pretty easy to get alone especially if you do assembly in Nebraska, you kind of feel isolated in the industry. So you need to have these conversations.
Not like Detroit, right? Not like
right.
The grit that you have in Detroit.
That's right.
That's
or
right.
surrounding neighborhoods. So how'd you all get together for this? I mean, it's kind of a eclectic group. I can almost understand contract manufacturer, stencil manufacturer, but two contract manufacturers that, at least on paper, could be competitors. How did you guys meet each other, and then how did you guys decide to start this podcast?
It was all me, Mike. Everything was me.
Everything was you. That's the grit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, no, honestly though, because like one day I was on LinkedIn scrolling through trying to find some content that I liked, and then this guy Daniel kept posting, and then one day he posts a picture of an NEO2 and asked, "Do you know what this is?" And then I started texting him, because that's the same equipment I have. And in board fab, you always talk to everybody who has the same equipment as you, because there's going to be some problems, some issues going on. So we started talking, and then Elias sent me an unsolicited sales pitch, and tried to get me to buy his stencils.
Shameless.
Yeah. And he was telling me the price, and I said, I'm getting it for way cheap. I don't want to talk to you anymore.
And then I remember that a little differently, but
we did talk for like a month, and then one of my old stencil suppliers tried to raise my price, and then I sent it to him, and then we just started talking more and more and more, and then I was like, hey, you should talk to Daniel, and then we finally got on a group chat. And then the biggest thing was I came from the PCB fab world, so I could give my PCB fab. Daniel came from contract manufacturing, and then Elias was the stencil side, so we had all three different aspects of manufacturing, and we're having, like Dana said, amazing conversations. And we said, why don't we talk? And then selfishly, we wanted to interview people like you, Mike, to find out and learn from you, because it felt like such a great way for us to find out all this information and gain knowledge from other people that have been doing this forever, and their voices are almost silenced unless you talk to them directly somehow, some way. So it was selfish in that way, but it's been great. I love it. It's fun.
Yeah, I know in my experience doing this podcast, I learned so much. It's like stealing candy from babies. I mean, it should be a crime, or at least a misdemeanor somewhere, that I'm trying to educate my audience, but I'm really asking questions that in almost every event I don't know the answer to, and I'm curious. I was born with a very curious mind, and I have this insatiable desire to understand how things work, and so it satisfies my curiosity, and it builds my knowledge base up. I like to say that I could sit next to someone on an airplane for however long and have at least, no matter what part of the electronics industry they're in, I can talk like I know what I'm talking about for about 30 minutes. And then I'm out, because I don't know much beyond that. But it's amazing the amount of knowledge that kind of creeps in during conversation, as opposed to just going to a conference and hearing, one-way audio coming from the speaker to you. It's a great format to learn. And if you can bring an audience along with you, even better, right? So how did the two of you were collaborative, and I say the two of you meaning Daniel and Sean were collaborative, you met each other on LinkedIn, and one of you reached out about a piece of equipment. And how did you overcome, if there was something to overcome, the fact that the two of you in the same space, largely, hunting for the same customers, would collaborate and do a podcast together? Was there any concern over, I need to sound, better than the other guy, or I don't want to, I'm going to hold back a little bit because I don't want someone to have secret sauce, my secret sauce, or was that just not in your DNA, either of you?
I'm curious to hear Daniel's comment first on this one.
All right, Daniel, you're on the hook.
Because
He set me up so well. It's like
he knows how you're going to answer this. He set you up.
Do I have to try so hard to sound smarter than the other guy? It's like, well, it's Sean. But, for the most part, we don't look at each other as competition. We help each other all the time. If he has a problem with an assembly and I have any clue in any way, shape, or form what he might need to do with his machinery to help, I'm not like, all right, I'm just going to keep that info to myself. Hopefully he stumbles and I'm going to, pick him up. It's like we've given him the opportunity to provide boards for us. I've even let him make me a free carrier. So we work together on things.
That was generous of you, Daniel.
I try.
Yeah. And how did, Elias, how did you get into this space? Did they reach out to you? Did someone reach out to you and say, hey, we need more than just CM stuff, or what?
No, it was interesting. I would see the two of them kind of interacting on LinkedIn all the time. I don't know, the algorithm liked these two for some reason, but they kept being in my feed, and I didn't understand their relationship because, like you said, they're both PMs. But I thought, are they divisions of each other? What these guys? They're obviously buddy. And about that time, Sean had posted some pictures of his PCBA setup, right? So he refit the entire building, put in new equipment, and at about the same time, we were building out our new laser suite, adding another laser. So I was in the same space as him. So I sent him a message on LinkedIn saying, hey, bud, I appreciated your post. Beautiful space. Here's what we're doing here. To which he quipped back instantly, telling me who he bought his stencils for and what price he was buying them at. And I'm like, I'm not trying to sell you anything here. So,
defense. He's playing defense.
Yeah. I think my response to him was like, oh, you're direct. I like your style. And he said, east side of Detroit, you have to be or don't make eye contact. I think that was the line.
There you go. A gritty response.
Yeah, and that kind of somehow that turned into a friendship pretty quickly, and then Daniel came into the equation, and I've known these guys, less than a year, and we're all very good friends at this point. But just some chat conversations, BSing about, hey, a podcast and this and that, and 5 months later from that first initial conversation, here we are.
That's great. You have about 14 or 15 episodes under your belt now? Is that right?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, I think we have 14 released and
a couple more in the bank.
15 released.
Yeah, excellent.
15?
What was
so.
Your biggest challenge once you decided, hey, let's do this podcast? What did you find your biggest challenge? Okay, so you have a much harder job than I do because there's three of you. There's one of me, so I've got my schedule.
In 3 different time zones.
And 3 time zones, and then you bring on a guest. That's 4 calendars.
And 3 families.
Yeah, right. So scheduling, that's an ongoing challenge, right? That's not going to get any easier. Were there any other challenges, like finding guests or from the tech standpoint, the cameras, the microphones, all that stuff? I mean, what did you have to overcome? How did you learn how to distribute a podcast? What were the basic steps you took in case some of my audience are looking at you guys going, I can do that. Or looking at me and go, I can do that even better. What what were the steps you had to go through?
We consulted a podcasting process expert who actually did this wonderful presentation for us on exactly how to start a podcast. It's well worth anyone's time and money. Sign up for it. Give him like all of your money. It's brilliant. No, Mike, really though, you helped us so much at the start figure out the hardware, the ins and outs of the industry, how to use the different hosting platforms. So I'd say the best thing you can do is talk to somebody who's already currently doing it so that you don't have to go through all the same stumbling blocks that they might have when they were learning what they were doing, you know?
Yeah, I did the same thing. When I started my podcast, it was like 4 years ago or maybe a little more than that. There wasn't a lot of other podcasts in our space. So there wasn't too many people. I think I talked to one or two people and got their advice, but most of what I had to learn, I had to drop all humility, go on YouTube and be taught by 13-year-olds, how to, overcome some tech issues. And it's like, first, I'd say, oh, this is the right subject. And I'd click play. And then I'm noticing that's a 12 or 13-year-old. I'm like, no. And I'd look for someone closer to my age. And finally, I'm like, damn, I'm going to go back to the 13-year-old and work through the strong accent and figure out how it's done. So, I think it's good to seek out that advice and might as well try and avoid some of the mistakes, other people have made before you. But what's interesting in our industry, a couple of things. When I first got into this industry, before any of you were born, most likely, there was no internet, right? So it was all conferences, and we were an exceptionally collaborative industry. It struck me because I was new to this industry. I came in from, left field, and I didn't know anything about electronics in terms of the industry. And I was amazed when I went to these conferences to see 8 competitors on the stage, all talking about best practices and tricks and tips and things like that. I'm like, wow. I mean, it's extremely collaborative. Over the years, over the decades that I've been in this industry, I've seen some of that shrink a little bit. I've seen companies become a little bit more guarded and a little bit less collaborative. So it's really refreshing when I saw your podcast blossom to know that the collaboration is not a thing of the past. You guys are doing it. You're talking about it. You're actually doing it. And the guests that come on your show are happy to share their wisdom as well. They don't appear to be guarded. So it's great to see that level of collaboration and openness and helpfulness that we don't see as much today as we used to. Have you found that? I know you're, thankfully you're young and you don't go back as far as I do, but have you seen that since you guys have gotten into this industry, kind of a slight closing up, or have you always experienced it extremely collaborative?
I feel like it's increased, and I don't know what to attribute it to. Maybe with the kind of decline in in-person social networking events, or they're still there. But Mike, you've been around for long enough. If you can remember back to say Apex a decade ago compared to Apex this year, right? The attendance is down, right? It's common knowledge. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's folks not getting the opportunity to sit in the lobby bar at the hotel and have a beer and actually open up with each other. What to attribute it to, but I think that this format, this media, seems to almost replicate that. People get really comfortable and have candid conversations, and it's been great. You asked about the challenges of getting started and brought up potentially getting guests, and I don't say this to be braggadocious at all, more to recognize the graciousness of the folks in the industry, but everybody is so willing to talk to it. Sometimes we just kind of sit there starstruck when a person like Mike Conrad agrees to come on to our podcast. And I think that says a lot about the folk that are in the industry. They want to share, they want to collaborate, and this is the space to do it in, I think.
Yeah, I think, thank you for the kind words. I think we, us podcasters, us webinar producers, we are content creators, are partially responsible for the de-evolution of attending traditional trade shows and conferences, because it used to be, before the internet, the only way to get information like that was to either read monthly magazine articles where they'd publish papers, or go to a conference. And when an alternate came out, on demand, 24/7, tons of content by tons of creators, some of it good, some of it not, but all available. The need to wait, if you have a technical problem, 364 days before a conference, so one day after the conference ended, you're not going to wait 364 days to say, I can't wait for that conference to come because I need a solution to this problem. You're going to go online and seek it yourself. And your generation in particular are information seekers. You don't wait for the salesman to drive into your parking lot, walk through your visitor lobby, hand you line cards, and show you samples out of their trunk. Those days are gone. Now it's like, no, you're just going to go online. You're going to go to YouTube or Google or whatever, smta.org or IPC, and you're going to search for the answers yourself. And then you may call someone in, if you have additional needs. But you guys are your generation largely, and to some degree mine, but less so, are information detectives. Fortunately, the content has matured enough to be plentiful. So I think we live in a great age, but the downside of that is we're missing the networking, because we don't have to go to a conference to see the relevant topics we're interested in. And when we don't go to the conference, when we look at pixels rather than people, we miss that connection. And you guys experienced that connection firsthand at Surface Mount Technology International a couple of weeks ago. I saw you guys there, and
big time. You
guys were rubbing shoulders and shaking hands and kissing babies and all that. And I know that in an upcoming conference, you're going to be hosting a podcast from there. So a lot is moving in your direction quite positively, and I think that's good for the industry. I applaud what you guys are doing. I think we need more of that. We need more open sharing of content without, the immediate expectation of a return. There is a return, that I know, but it's sharing information, because the tide raises all ships, and I think what you guys are doing is noble and valuable, for sure.
Thank you.
How do you find your? You said you're having no problem finding guests. Are there specific? Is there a specific type of content you hope to get? Is there a particular guest like oh man, I wish I could get that person? Is there a goal in mind to keep the show in a certain trajectory, or expand it, or is it too early to ask that question?
We're talking to Chris Shea later, so we'll probably just hang it up after that. Like, what's the point? Right?
That's it, right? Yeah, there's no one left. Yeah. Everyone else is a disappointment.
We've reached the pinnacle, so done deal. We've hit all our goals now.
Yeah.
It's been. I have to piggyback on what Elias said. The support has been incredible. It's been so overwhelming to have every single person we've asked be so willing and eager to join, and not just join, but we learn, like you said, Mike, you learn something every time you have one of these conversations. So to have the kind of guests with the caliber and pedigree, with the years of experience and kind of projects they've been involved in, it's just been incredibly flattering, humbling. We couldn't be more grateful. It's been probably one of the best career decisions any of us have ever made. It's been super fun.
Excellent. And finally, last question. What advice would you give to emerging engineers, emerging technicians, people new to the industry, young or older, but people who are just kind of entering this space, what advice would you give to them? We'll start with Daniel, because Daniel likes to be first, I hear.
Keep learning. Like, I think no matter how much experience you have, there's new techniques, there's new designs coming out, there's new substrates, there's new materials, there's new solder paste, different type of reflow ovens. There's just, I mean, it's just everything's changing all the time. You can't just rest on your laurels and expect that nothing's ever going to change and your level of knowledge is going to be good forever. So, and the cool thing is, like we found, there's so many different people who want to share their knowledge and want to help bring you along. And so I'd say whether you are fresh into it, in the middle of your career, you've been doing this a long time, if you've been doing it a long time, find somebody who hasn't, because you're going to get invigorated by their passion and excitement. If you're the opposite, find somebody who needs to find you, like find the people where you're going to help each other,
Right. Yeah, excellent. Elias?
I would say don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something or when something's foreign or unfamiliar, right? Open yourself up to learn something. None of us know everything. Doesn't matter if you've been doing it for 20 months or 20 years, there's always something new or always something that you haven't been exposed to. So just ask questions of those that are in the know. Find a network, whether it, through a local chapter, local organization, or digitally on, LinkedIn's a great platform, but surround yourself with the folks that have the knowledge you seek and be open and let your guard down enough to actually learn those lessons.
Great advice. And Sean?
I would say get certified in as many IPC certifications as you possibly can. You wouldn't believe the lack of talent out there that have certified in those fields. It's unbelievable. And instead of actually like going to college as a kid, I wish I would have got certified in IPC standards. That would have trajectoried me so much further.
Yeah.
And the main goal is don't focus on rework. I mean, obviously to be a better overall, but the thing I've been reading a lot lately from them is don't focus on reworking things that aren't really a defect, and that to me is priceless. The certifications, what you can learn from an IPC class, even the SMTA, the resources available there. Spend your time, if you're going to learn from that, because that truly is your standard. That's your gold standard. You can grow from that. You can learn from that. And I feel like the certification cost versus the cost of a college would probably get you a better income today than getting a college degree.
Yeah. I've long said that college will prepare an electrical engineer with an EE degree. They'll understand how electrons work. They'll understand maybe how to read a color code on a resistor, but they won't know what the proper squeegee pressure is or the best method to apply a thermocouple to a board for temperature profiling, or how to set each zone on a 7-zone oven. That's called job experience. That's tribal, and the education is super valuable. But it's the beginning of a learning process. The graduation from university is the beginning of a learning process when it comes to SMT production. There's so much tribal stuff that just can't be taught. That would be a 40-year degree, which we call work experience, life experience. So, I think organizations like SMTA and IPC and IEEE and INEMI and all the other I's out there, we as associations have a responsibility to grab the baton in the relay race from the universities and trade schools to educate the rest of the information, the missing information, the void. Because I don't think any college graduate can grab their diploma, run over to J-Bill, stand in front of a surface mount line and run it. Why would they? I wouldn't expect that, but industry kind of expects that. But that's not what college is for. So what you're doing fills, one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. What this show's doing, what other shows, podcasts, and other content creators in this space are doing is helping fill those gaps and add one more piece to the puzzle. So thanks for being one of those pieces. You guys are doing a great job at it. And I wish you all the success in the world. I don't need to, because I think you're going to have it on your own anyway. You're already demonstrating that. You're off to a very fast start, which is very impressive. And I just wish you continued success, and not just in your day jobs that helps pay for what you're doing here, but in the podcast itself. The more people you can impact, the more authority you will be able to put on display. And, you guys are very quickly becoming, if you're not already there, influencers within the electronic assembly industry. So congratulations on that. Keep it going.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Mike.
for the support.
Thanks, Mike.
And thanks for being my guest on the show. To my audience, if you're watching this podcast on YouTube and you'd like to get a hold of Daniel, Elias, or Sean, look down here somewhere. It says Show More. You click there and you'll see contact information on all three, including their company websites. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, when it's safe to do so, click on your podcast site and look at the show notes. They're there, and you can find the contact information there as well. So, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, and it was great seeing you a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, in the flesh rather than in pixel form. And I'll see you at IPC Apex Expo in March of 25.
Yes, sir.
All right. Take care,
bet.
fellas.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for listening to or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Reliability Matters on your favorite podcast app. If you're watching this podcast on the Reliability Matters YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the second and fourth Tuesday of every single month. A special thanks to the Printed Circuit Engineering Association's PCB Chat at pcbchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating this show. Thanks also for your questions and episode suggestions. Please keep them coming. I love to hear from you. Send comments or episode suggestions to Mike at mikeconrad.com. Just remember that's Conrad spelled with a K. To learn more about the Reliability Matters podcast, please visit our website at reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening or watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and perhaps most importantly, keep doing it right. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.